All right, we're here with one of our favorite guests on Kitco News, Frank Holmes. He's a speaker, and he's taking part in a debate on the topic of China. So happy year of the dragon, Frank.
A year of being very prosperous.
Well, have you come with some positive energy to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference?
Well, I hope so. In the past 18 months, China's been trying to slow down inflation, and they've done a great job at doing that. And all of a sudden now you're seeing the spigot open and money supply is expanding rapidly in China. And we saw at the beginning of this year a huge run up in a lot of the commodities and copper, et cetera. So I think that China's in place to continue their program for now building subways and super train systems throughout their economy.
Right. I had an interview earlier this morning with Gordon Chang, who you will be debating on this very topic, and he says that China right now is stockpiling all these industrial metals. Is that a trend that you're seeing as well?
Well, every time they've done that is because they've approved projects. So you might as well tell you the commodities are depressed. They buy them now because in the future, why pay a higher price if they have surplus cash? And why would you keep it in dollars when you're earning a negative real rate of interest? What are you going to make on your treasury bills? You're going to make 10 basis points and inflation is running in the US just under 4%. You might as well go and buy the copper that you're going to need in the next 12 to 18 months. So we've seen that take place, and we saw that in particular at the end of 2008, at the very crisis of that financial crisis. All of a sudden the Chinese came start buying up all the commodities for all their future projects.
Now, let's talk about China and gold. What patterns have you been seeing here? Do they still have a love for the metal?
They do, and Chinese imports remain strong. And what people have to recognize that in emerging countries where that love trade is on, anytime gold spikes very quickly, $100, $150, they stop buying. And as soon as it falls $100, $150, all of a sudden they come in India, China, Vietnam, et cetera, are a buyer of gold. So the spikes. So in December, we had gold fall 10% in a month. Now, why did that take place? Well, a big factor was only the month before was Japan had moved their currency dramatically, and a lot of people borrowed in Japanese yen to invest in gold in other places, and so this unraveling took place. So that stopped. It usually takes 6 weeks for that to permeate throughout the market. We had that in August. Once again, gold went through a correction, then rallied again. So I think the real key factor for your listeners is to follow the Japanese. They're behind every major contraction in emerging markets because they let people borrow money inexpensively and they go buy dividend-paying stocks, they go buy gold, they buy commodities, and then all of a sudden they pull back their country's currency and you see this rippling effect around the world.
Okay, Frank, this is an interesting take because what I've been hearing is follow the Europeans.
If you want just with fear, they're always behind the curve. If you really want to see where the inexpensive borrowing is taking place, it is coming out of Japan. And you can go back and look at a chart and you can see every time there's a huge Japanese currency yen move that there's a rippling effect, and those that take it on the chin are usually those that are invested in stocks and emerging markets.
Now, Frank, you weren't surprised by the correction we had seen in December. Do you see an upcoming one for gold happening? What's your sentiment for the metal?
Well, I was surprised, honestly, in December, a 10% drop has only happened 7% of the time for the past 10 years. That in 1 month that you would have even a spike of that amount or a correction. And I didn't expect it to be that amount in December. But what you do see in the backdrop of that is a rally coming out of January. And if the January stock market is strong in the US and gold is strong and copper is strong, then I think that bodes very well for the global economic activity, because the US, you're seeing companies are not hiring people directly, but they are going out and updating their technology, they're updating their buildings, so there's a capex taking place in America, which is creating jobs internally. That's very positive. At the same time, China is turning around and dropping the interest rates, changing the banking rules to help facilitate an economic boom.
All right, rally coming out of January. Frank, if you had to choose between the euro, the US dollar, or the Fed, which one do you think would have the greatest impact on the price of gold?
Well, Europe has the risk of a charismatic dictator coming in. We had Mussolini's, the Hitlers. That is the black swan is because of their democracy is based on a different code of law. It's a civil law. It's not a common law. And so it's very hard to get dictators coming in when there's a common law judicial system. So I think that that is the sort of black swan. That was to happen, and the euro splits up, et cetera. But the euro has to go back at parity to the dollar. Right. It's just crazy where it is, the cost of a hotel, the cost of anything. So I think it's inevitable that it trades lower.
Frank, as I mentioned, you're taking part in a debate with Gordon Chang, who I interviewed earlier this morning. What do you think is going to be the toughest punch he'll bring to the table?
Well, I think he's very articulate. and I think he's done a lot of research on China as a whole. But he has so far been able to see is only find what's negative, and always every time held accountable to something that's a long-term scenario. And I've seen this thought process, but in every country there's always negative. And like I mentioned this morning when we spoke, one after the other,
right.
It was that it's always healthy to have Mr. Chang come along because markets have a bid and an ask.
Right.
And great knowledge is the arbitrage between facts and fiction and what is emotions and what are hardcore facts.
Frank, we look forward to the debate. Thank you so much.
That's great to be here.
And thanks for watching Kitco News. Stay tuned to kitco.com for more coverage from the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. For Kitco News, I'm Daniela Cambone.